Tom, you told me you want to talk about Mark Carney off the top, or how about talking about Pierre Poilievre off the top and the speech he gave, which is actually getting a lot of interest today, given the fact that he was talking about international trade for the first time in quite a while.
Yes, as long as you and I can get to the most recent iteration of Pastegate for the Boulangerie La Majoune, sure. Of course we can talk about Poilievre and Carney. I had a chance to listen to Poilievre's very good speech yesterday, and I honestly had the feeling that, a little bit like Carney, he poured his heart and soul into this one. He wanted this to be his speech. What was most interesting to me is he was clearly trying to demarcate for Canadian voters the fact that he is a serious player. He's not going to remain the guy who keeps babbling on and rattling off the same list of 4 or 5 complaints. Oh, sure, in there he was going to get rid of the last remaining carbon tax, which is the industrial one, which doesn't make any sense, but that doesn't matter. He's at least stating his positions. But on the international stuff, he's saying, look, we need more leverage. We haven't gone about it in the right way. And he set out his own proposals, let the Americans in to have our, for example, critical minerals, but then in return for that, we would get no tariffs on our stuff. I mean, the basic idea of being in a better leveraging position, as he kept calling it, a better bargaining position, he said, he wanted to make us unassailable and very strong. And I think that overall, it was a very smart approach.
All right, so that's Pierre Poilievre. Mark Carney is in India trying to work out a trade deal, but of course there's some pushback here because, of course, the Canadians suggesting this is not who we should be doing business with. This kind of thing he had to deal with in dealing with China as well. So what do you think? How does he handle this?
If Mr. Carney is going to accomplish what he has set out to do, which is to double the amount of trade Canada does in the world outside of the United States, then he's got to be sitting down and talking with Narendra Modi of India and President Xi of China, as he did just a few weeks ago, and working big financial markets like those in the Middle East and in Europe and in Great Britain, just making sure that he's talking with the right people, the people that know him. When he walks into a room, he is taken seriously. And the whole notion of foreign interference, of course, with both China and India is extraordinarily serious. There are huge, diaspora communities from both countries in Canada, and those countries can almost not resist using agents and otherwise to help influence votes. That's one thing. But of course, in the case of India, there was a very credible accusation that the Indian government was involved in the killing of a Canadian on Canadian soil. Members of the Sikh community are extraordinarily concerned about what they're seeing in this rapprochement with Modi, but at the same time, Carney is being the same pragmatist who went to Beijing recently. And I think the Canadians are saying, okay, this is the way the world is unfolding. By the way, going to the previous conversation, Poilievre really took a shot at the fact that Carney was warming up Canada's relationships with China, just went almost as strongly anti-China as Aaron O'Toole had done before him. So it was an interesting contrast as well.
Okay, before we move on to the bakery, let me ask you about what's happening here. We had a Palace data poll showing, and this is a bit of a surprise, Tom. I wonder if you reacted the same way, showing that race, PQ at 30, the Liberals here provincially at 27. Is this a one-off?
It's a one-off. Nobody else has been doing any polling that even vaguely resembles that. But the other thing to mention, of course, is that 27 is so heavily doped in Montreal and Greater Montreal, it doesn't translate into seats. So when the Liberals became the official opposition under Dominic Anglade, they got more seats with almost the same share of the votes. That was efficient because they held on to the Liberal seats, the Liberal votes. Now, if you want to get those seats back, then you're on the right track. But the problem for Charles Milliard is to be able to get beyond the single digits. We had a real test this week on Monday, not a poll sampling of a couple of hundred people. We had a real test in a by-election, with tens of thousands of people allowed to vote, and the Liberals came in at 9%. And that's the simple reality for them. Outside of Montreal, as things stand right now, they will get virtually no seats. So don't let that 27 and 30 make you believe that somehow the Liberals are closing in on the PQ. They're not. Their vote is inefficient province-wide, very efficient in its home base of Montreal and the western part of Montreal in particular. It's still a huge challenge for the Liberals. And when they decided to exclude Marois Risky, simply everyone agrees the best MNA in that caucus, and it's because, in my view, most of the members of that caucus were in favor of Pablo Rodriguez. That's not a question of opinion, that's a fact. And she, it was the beginning of the end of Pablo Rodriguez when she had that dispute with him. That is now some parts of it anyway before the courts, but it's also in front of UPAC, it's in front of the Ethics Commissioner, and it's in front of Elections Quebec. So how they contrived to somehow blame the victim, in this case, Marwa Risky, is still beyond me. I think it showed a lack of leadership, frankly, from Mr. Mulcair, and I think that voters are going to see something quite different. If and when, and I really do believe she's got this thing in a lock, and that's in another palace poll, Christine Fréchette wins the leadership of the CAQ, keep an eye on the CAQ. They're not a spent force. They've got some very strong ministers. They've got some decent organization on the ground. Quebecers don't want another referendum, but they want strong nationalism, and they're not going to get that with either the PQ or with Quebec Solidaire, which are both promising to vote in favor of the separation of Quebec from Canada. The CAQ, can it continue its dance on the tightrope where it says neither this, neither that? Maybe. But with the madness that you and I are about to speak about, going after a bakery for its TikTok account because they've counted up the English words and the French words and there's not quite enough French, that's the type of boneheaded move that could turn everybody in the greater Montreal area even further against the CAQ. And that's the hope of somebody modern and progressive and open like Christine Fréchette. But if she's still dealing with the dinosaurs and the kooks who run the language police here in Quebec, then she's going to have a heck of a hard time convincing anybody to vote CAQ next time around.
So you heard Bernard Dranville, Tom, right, come out and talk about, based on Bill 94, the teachers were now going to lose because he says it's their fault. The law, the rules were there as far as wearing a religious symbol,
Sure.
At your work. The problem, of course, with that is we have to replace these people. We already know fewer and fewer people want to go into that profession to begin with. So what do you make of this? I mean, was that really necessary to call these people out?
No, of course not. He's playing politics on the backs of minorities, which has been a part of the trademark of the CAQ under François Legault. And don't forget, this is the same Bernard Dranville who brought in the infamous Charter of Values under Pauline Marois because he was a separatist. Now he says he's not a separatist, but maybe he'll become a separatist again. We'll see what happens with the leadership. So blaming the victims, again, these are people who are in religious minorities who are the victims, being picked on, being discriminated against openly by the CAQ government. It'll be before the Supreme Court. We won't get a decision before the next provincial election in the fall. It's as simple as that. The Supreme Court's just going to sit on this thing for as long as it has to, so that it won't become an election issue. But sooner or later, somebody's going to have to say the simple truth that we don't live in a society where a provincial government can openly discriminate against religious minorities. At least I hope that's going to be the result of the Supreme Court case.
So one last thing I had Eric Girard on the show yesterday late because I'd heard him talk about, the referendum and how much it's costing Quebec in terms of added interest that we're paying, because rating agencies look at the risk involved.
Yeah,
and there's been more talk about a referendum. And on the other, as soon as he finished saying that, Paul St. Pierre Plamondon came out and said that's not the case. The fact of the matter is, the CAQ has basically been doing a terrible job of managing the economy, and that's why we're paying more.
Yeah, but Bloomberg, which has no dog in this fight, has put out a paper on November 11th looking at the Quebec situation and talked to senior investment advisors in the United States who are just saying don't buy anything to do with the government of Quebec bonds or otherwise right now. We won't recommend it to our clients because they're back into a serious insecurity with the threat of separation. So Paul St. Pierre Plamondon can invent stories to try to convince himself and his followers that the threat of breaking up one of the most successful and wealthy countries in the world, Canada, and taking out the province of Quebec to live on its own with its share of the federal debt and no ability currently to provide health care or education care in any meaningful way, that somehow everything's going to get better once you break up Canada. I mean, it's madness. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't hold any water. And good on them for the Liberals, first and foremost, and the Conservatives, because Mr. Mulcair played fast and loose with the truth when he said that the Conservatives are sketchy on this. No, Mr. Duhem is very clear on this. It's a hard no. The CAQ is going to keep playing its little bit of this, little bit of that game. The old Robert Bourassa thing. Well, Quebec's master of its own house. We can always decide to split if we want to. That's going to be what you're getting from the CAQ. But from what I've seen so far, there's no inclination whatsoever from Christine Fréchette to go down that road.
I want to ask you one last thing. We'll get to the last story. I keep adding things. But, when I had the minister on yesterday, first of all, I said to him, either way, in a referendum, he's made the point. I think he said for political gains, he understands why the PQ is doing this, but he said fiscally, it's basically a death sentence for Quebec, as you've just alluded to. And then I asked him how he would vote in a referendum. And the reason I brought that up, and I was going to ask you about what you think about Eric Duhem's chances now that the Conservatives did as well as they did in Chicoutimi. Eric Duhem, when asked, he says, no, we don't want a referendum. But when asked if he would vote yes or no, he wouldn't give an answer, Tom. So I asked Eric Girard that question yesterday, and I appreciate he's not leading a political party.
No.
And I said to him, how would you vote? And he said, without hesitation, that he would vote no. So what is that? Go ahead.
You just taught me something. I did not know that Duhem had started playing that game of not answering. So I'll take back what I said about, I think that Milliard was right to say that Duhem is fence-sitting on this. So I'll take back what I said earlier.
Okay.
Because it's shameful, because Duhem is an iconoclast. He's an interesting character. He is capable of getting 26% in Chicoutimi, and that's quite an impressive result. So I guess he's convinced himself he's got to start fence-sitting on whether or not he wants to break up Canada, which is an amazing change, because all along, with regard to minority rights, he's been far more progressive than anybody else on the Quebec political scene. He's a very interesting character. He's unique. He doesn't wait for other people to tell him what his opinions are. But to stick with Girard, our finance minister, and to go for 1 second with the question that you were just raising, the markets hate insecurity. Full stop. Money goes to where it's safe. Money flees insecurity. But that's with regard to the threat of separation. But I can tell you right now that when that little bakery, when their story starts making the front pages, not just of every newspaper in Canada, but of newspapers in the United States and around the world, it will be Pastagate. Now, for people whose memory doesn't stretch back to that was the absolute abject lunacy of the language cops, the vocabulary constabulary, going after an Italian restaurant because it had, wait for it, Italian words for the food on the menu. So nobody came up with the French word for spaghetti, I guess, or cannelloni, and they were being prosecuted. It was so stupid that it shone a really embarrassing light on the language bureaucracy. Well, this is what's going to happen again here. You got a family that speaks fluent French that has always served. They're in one of the most French areas of the city. Everybody gets along well with them. Their Instagram account has everything in French, as if the government has anything to tell you about what's on your Instagram account. But their TikTok account might have had a little bit too much English. This is where we are in the province of Quebec. We can't take the mold out of schools. We can't get anybody. We have one of the hospitals, one of the big Montreal hospitals, Pierre Boucher, on the South Shore. It has 4 autoclaves to sterilize equipment. All 4 of them were broken down. They had to cancel their operations. That's where we are in the province of Quebec, but we've got time and money to go after a bakery because they didn't have enough English on their TikTok accounts. Again, bon weekend tout le monde, but good luck with that if that becomes the front page news, because it's not going to be Paul Saint-Pierre Plamondon is going to be able to turn that around. Everybody's going to be looking at this place and saying, okay, it's run by a bunch of crackpots. Let's just stay away. And they won't say it the way Sun Life did years and years ago. They'll just say, no, we're just not going, or we're going to empty out our Montreal office. We'll want nothing to do with this place. But of course, they'll say that that's just being threatening. That's just blackmail against all this great project of taking Quebec out of Canada.
By the way, we will have Charbel Hanan from that bakery on the show just after 5:30.
Give him my best and tell him I'm looking forward to visiting. I was looking at the pictures online.
Looks good, doesn't it?
Looks like they've got some top stuff there.
I'm going to go there too. Thought the same thing. Tom, have a great weekend. Thanks so much.
I can sense a T-shirt coming on, Aaron.
Please, Tom, not now.
Take care.
I don't know what I'm going to do. I was going to do a referendum one. I think maybe that's not the best way to go. Maybe a pastry item would be better.
Canadian women are looking for more out of themselves, their businesses, their elected leaders, and the world around them.
And that's why we're thrilled to introduce the Honest Talk podcast.
I'm Jennifer Stewart.
And I'm Catherine Clark. And in this podcast, we interview Canada's most inspiring women.
Entrepreneurs, artists, athletes, politicians, and newsmakers, all at different stages of their journey.
So if you're looking to connect, then we hope you'll join us.
Listen to the Honest Talk podcast on iHeartRadio or wherever you listen to your podcasts.